On this episode of The Airport Economist, doing business in a post-Brexit world, we'll show you how. Plus the Australian company dominating the UK racing market. And he was a boy with big dreams, the Aussie fashion designer dressing the stars. Hello and welcome to London, the capital of the United Kingdom and once the heart of the British Empire that dominated world trade. I'm Tim Harcourt, the Airport Economist. We're about to find out how the UK economy is anticipating a post-Brexit world and what it means for Australians doing business here in the UK. I'm also going to look particularly at the UK's ties with South Australia, which was set up with very British institutions in mind. But first, let's take a closer look at the UK economy today. The United Kingdom, home to 65.6 million people, most living in England, followed by Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Its capital, London, is a bustling metropolis with millions coming here to do business every year. It's been a while since the heyday of the empire, when Britannia ruled the waves, but the UK is still a sizable place. It's the fifth largest economy in the world in terms of GDP, but 25th in terms of GDP per capita. Whilst the UK was the home of the Industrial Revolution, manufacturing isn't as significant as it once was, with financial services, education and creative industries now playing an important role. GDP is expected to grow at 1.7% a year, with inflation at 2.6% and unemployment at 4.4%. The United States is the UK's main export destination, followed by Germany and France. UK trade is still very much tied to the European Union, making Brexit negotiations akin to separating the egg white from the yolk after making an omelette. New IMF research suggests 90% of world economic growth will come from outside the EU. That's why the UK is trying to revive its relationship with Australia and trading partners in Asia and other parts of the emerging world. So as those figures show, the UK is still a significant global economic powerhouse. But whilst Australia has started looking towards Asia in recent years, the UK enmeshed itself within the European Union. That's now going to change because of the Brexit referendum that surprised Britain, not to mention Brussels. So now, what are the opportunities and the incentives for business to stay this side of the channel?
I think there's likely to be a short-term jolt as they adjust to leaving the EU. But if they play their cards well, and that depends very much what they do domestically, they could have a very exciting future because it'll be easier for them to negotiate bilateral trade agreements rather than be part of 28 countries all in unison trying to negotiate trade agreements, as is the case with the EU.
So if you're an investor out there, why the UK?
Well, I think the answer to that lies in what Australian investors do. The UK is the second largest destination for Australian offshore investment. The largest is the US. So interestingly enough, Australian investors would rather invest in the UK than in a whole raft of Asian markets where we trade. So the sovereign risk is incredibly low in the UK. The legal system is the same legal system as ours. The culture is not the same, but very similar. So it's easy for all of those reasons for Australian businesses to operate in the UK.
When you talk about the Australia proposition to UK investors, what things do you talk about?
Australia, it's an open economy, and it's not just an open economy to most British trade, but to British and British investors. But Australia is an open economy to a number of other economies which are important to corporate Britain. So Australia has a free trade agreement with China, it has one with Japan and with South Korea. It has a free trade agreement with the United States. So Australia comes across here in the UK as a very open, relatively free trading, very soundly, cautiously managed, relatively high growth economy.
When you look at the UK economy, are there any certain sectors that businesses should focus on?
The great strength of the British economy is the services sector. 80% of British GDP is services. So I would like to link up better South Australian service industries with British service industries. So here is an example: universities. Build stronger relationships with British universities And I think a lot could come out of that. I think a lot of effort should be put into that. Obviously, our agricultural industries have tremendous potential in the UK. Even the wine industry speaks for itself. It's already doing extraordinarily well in this market. I mean, the British market is now, I think it's still our second biggest market in terms of volume in the world. But overall, I think it's, the growth areas of the British economy, the future of an economy like Britain's is going to be very much in the services area.
Still to come, we'll hit the track to find out how one Australian business is galloping ahead of the pack. Before we go racing, let me tell you a story from right here in the heart of London. This is the site of the Old City Prison, where the politician Edward Gibbon Wakefield languished in 1827. During his incarceration, Wakefield came up with a plan for South Australia. He wanted to create a free colony of independent landowners, unlike the rest of Australia, that relied on convict labour. His plan eventually came to fruition, but South Australia came up with plenty of innovation itself, like the Torrens land title and votes for women, and continues to be innovative today. I sat down with South Australia's Agent General in London, Bill Muirhead. So what are some of the innovative things you've seen of South Australian businesses in the UK?
Well, wine is obviously a big one for us. Companies like Penfolds are particularly successful here and are strong and well established. We've got the best known brand of wine in the world in Jacob's Creek, which is well established here. But then there are other things that are quite innovative, and one of them is a business called Sundrop Farms, which was originated here in Europe, but then came to South Australia and set up and has now become a highly successful business in a completely new area of technology.
How does the South Australian office in London assist exporters coming to the UK?
We've got a network of business contacts, not just through government offices, but through our own business systems. And we've got something called the South Australia Club, which is a very active networking group that assists in that way. So, that I think has been quite a powerful weapon for us to use.
So let's turn it around. When you're talking to would-be investors, what is the South Australian proposition?
Obviously, there are advantages I think we have, particularly in some sectors. So if you're talking about defence, clearly that's a very important area for our economy. The real USP for us, or unique selling point for us, I think, is the fact that we're a better place to do business than other jurisdictions in Australia. The reason for that is, cost-wise, you're going to be better off.
South Australia was set up as a radical experiment here in London. But what social innovations did South Australia itself bring back to the UK?
We've always been good at doing things first. I mean, votes for women, right the way through to more recently abolishing plastic bags. So, we've been good at doing things first, and we've been good at innovating. So the whole renewable energy sector and things like that are really leading the way. But for us, there is a big issue here, and the big issue is around the awareness of the state, because without awareness, you'll never get preference and you won't get a sale. And South Australia, to many people over here, is a line through the middle of Australia, and we're everything underneath. So that caused a problem when I first started doing this job and led to the rebranding of the state.
How does the South Australian office in London help investors in a practical way?
Well, we've got a dedicated point of contact here in London with expertise in the different sectors that we're strong at. And the other thing that I think is really powerful for us is that this office reports directly to the Premier, which means that we can get decisions quickly, we can cut through a lot of the red tape and bureaucracy that goes on. There are plenty of opportunities, and that's really what we're here to do.
Coming up, why a maker of great reds from the Clare Valley has partnered with the greatest reds of all, the Liverpool Football Club. There's a business going great guns here in the UK. Steroline Racing makes starting gates found on racecourses across the world, including here at Kempton Park in southwest London. It's a competitive business, but they've been around for nearly a quarter of a century, so they must be doing something right. I spoke to their CEO, John Farger. Well, welcome to the show, John.
Thank you.
So tell us about Steroline Racing. What do you do?
Steroline Racing is an innovative manufacturer building horse racing equipment, pretty much all the metal work that goes onto the turf tracks. The starting gates, the stewards' towers, the winning posts, the fencing, pretty much all of the metal work.
What countries do you export to?
It's really a matter of which countries we're not in, rather than which ones we're in. But Britain's been a very good market for us, and we take that part of the world extremely serious because that's perceived to be the motherland by many people in horse racing.
How long have you been in Britain for?
Well, it's a long story. We sold our first gates there in about 2002 or 3, but it took us 8 years prior to that to break into the market. And we worked extremely hard in those 8 years for the reasons that I've just mentioned. We wanted to get to the country that other people were looking to as a reference point.
How does Britain's connection with the European Union affect your business? Do you feel the dead hand of Brussels?
No. I can't see any reason why things are likely to change so far. Certainly, there's no change to this point. We have all of the starting gates in Britain. 100% of the market is Steroline product made here in Mount Barker in South Australia. And obviously, we will work very hard to keep that way.
How does Britain work as a market, as a place to do business in, compared to the Middle East or South America or other markets?
I'd have to say Britain's relatively straightforward. I mean, we have the same rules of law. They understand the same business principles that we use. So generally speaking, it's straightforward doing business in Britain.
Is it important to have government relationships with state or federal government?
It's extremely important globally for us because horse racing is to some extent government controlled in all jurisdictions. Because it's taxed, there's a gambling revenue flow through to governments, and so there's a connection through the financial arm of it. There's also a connection through the veterinary side because it's usually government-controlled vets that are running the systems on horse race tracks.
What advice would you give to other South Australian businesses looking at Britain?
You've got to be persistent. I think if you want to be an exporter anywhere, be persistent. I think the UK is a good market, as I said, because of the sort of standardisation, if you like, of rules and regulations. Both sides know what to expect and what's happening, and therefore it's relatively straightforward. So if you're breaking into export, it's not a bad place to start.
Coming up, why Australian scientists are teaming up with British researchers in the ancient university town of Cambridge. But first, London is known as one of the great fashion hubs of the world. A boy from South Australia once had big dreams of making it here as he designed frocks from his parents' lounge room. Paul Vasileff did eventually realise his dream, and today his label, Paolo Sebastian, is a favourite among the stars. We caught up with Paul at his Adelaide headquarters.
When I was first starting out, I was told constantly that you're going to have to move out of Adelaide. Even Australia, it's not something that you're going to be able to do from here. But I'm just so grateful that it has worked and I've had that support around me to kind of push me to keep going. And here we are today.
What's your biggest business highlight?
My lifetime highlight, I would say, not even career highlight, but lifetime highlight has been working with Disney. And we had people in the front row of that show, 80-year-old women saying that they felt 5 years old again. So for me, that was the ultimate compliment because that's all I wanted to do was really transport people back to, I guess, their childhood and that feeling of anything being possible and celebrating dreams coming true.
Is it possible to run a leading international fashion brand from Adelaide?
Well, we're trying. Look, it's certainly not the easiest thing to do. Even being in Australia, we are so far removed from the rest of the world, and particularly in fashion, we are so far from everyone. But thankfully, in this day and age, when you have internet and Skype and things, you know, it doesn't matter where you are anymore.
What's the UK like as a market?
The UK has been really wonderful for us. I mean, my first experience with the UK was when I was studying in Milan. I was very fortunate to win a design competition and was flown over to London for Fashion Week and had one of my designs shown during London Fashion Week, and that was an amazing experience. And since then, as Paolo Sebastian has grown, we've worked with so many clients in the UK, and I think it's a market that's only going to continue to grow for us, and I hope it continues to grow for us because I think there's such a connection between both cultures.
How do you see the future of the UK and its importance to your business?
For our business, it is so important because it has that Australian connection, but it is so, it's an international hub. And when you think of London, you think of fashion, particularly with the hand craftsmanship and the work that we do, there's a lot of interest there. So there's a great potential for us to expand there.
Up next, the small Australian winery that teamed up with one of the world's most famous football clubs.
If you're thinking of doing business here in the UK, how do you actually do it? Well, small Australian winery Claymore's took a very big leap by joining forces with one of the world's most famous football clubs, Liverpool. So let's go inside their home ground, Anfield, and find out how this unique partnership is paying dividends both on the pitch and in the vineyards.
We are the official wine partner to the Liverpool Football Club in Australia, which is exciting and fun and exhausting, and it's been a roller coaster of learning. The opportunity came about largely when the first team toured into Adelaide in 2015. And because we produce and have produced a wine that's labelled You'll Never Walk Alone since 2004, in honour of the song of the club, in honour of Bill Shankly, in honour of the club itself, it seemed a natural thing for us to look at trying to do something around that match. That went off really well, was wonderful, was meant to be a once-off thing. Big party on the banks of the Torrens, great fun. And then out of that, there was further conversation with the business development contacts at Liverpool about looking at a regional partnership for the brand in Australia.
The UK is a big place. How do you compete? And is it an important market in its own right, or do you use it as a springboard to Europe?
We actually do treat the UK and continental Europe as a bit of a geographic trading bloc. We have to. The scale of our business means that we can't afford to be across in market every 2 months. You need to maximise your energies and your efficiencies. It costs you nothing once you're here to scoot across and catch up with your continental European customer base. Having said that, our strategy's really only opened up those markets in the last 12 months, and the UK has been definitely a springboard from that.
How is doing business here compared to doing business in Australia?
There are lost in translation moments, but that's not peculiar to the UK. That happens everywhere. So you need to be quite clear in your communication. We're fortunate I work with an importer here who has close ties to South Australia, had visited regularly, understands some of the Aussie vernacular, and I have less of those lost in translation moments. But I think fundamentally doing business here is, in the wine industry, it's harder to understand your opportunities because you're not actively in this market all the time. You need to rely on the people representing you, and when you're over here for 2 weeks, you've got to suck up every bit of knowledge that they share with you to see where your opportunities might lie. To do what we do to the best of our abilities, you've got to carry it in with you. That passion, you've got to take it wherever you go. Otherwise, you end up being a gimmick and a hack, and there's no authentic tie to what you do. And loads of people can tell those stories, but if I can tell a story that comes from the heart, well, I tend to be a few steps ahead of my competition. So, that sense of place and that pride that we have in our vineyards, our region. We took Robbie Fowler out to the vineyards. That's probably one of the best moments of my life, is getting him to have a look at Shiraz grapes on the vine, to get that sense of the spirit of a place. It doesn't have to be Robbie Fowler though. The general man on the street, if he gets to see vineyards like that and that one-on-one experience, that sense of place and space and time, you carry it with you for a long time.
But what about the world of bioscience? That's what brings us here to the university town of Cambridge, where international academics are working together to develop innovative technologies to benefit the world.
If you go back to 99, 2000, Lord Sainsbury in the UK was then the science minister. And he did a report looking at, if you really want the economy to grow in these knowledge economies, innovation-rich sectors, you needed people to talk to each other. You needed clusters to form. You had to find a way of networking those clusters so that experiences could be shared, entrepreneurs could meet inventors, they could meet customers. And that was the first step really for the UK, saying, okay, we need technology clusters.
So how does the cluster work?
I think Cambridge is probably an exemplar of how a cluster works. It works where you get this coming together and convergence of like-minded people and disruptors most of the time. And it's always a handful of people that start anything off, and you can trace Cambridge back to probably 3, 4, or 5 key movers. And I think at that point, you need the underlying pipeline of supply of innovation from universities, talent pools, places that people want to live. Clusters only work if you want to be there. You can't just sort of create them and think people will move. But it lives, it becomes a very dynamic beast as an ecosystem at that point.
So how do everyday people benefit from this cluster?
If you go way back, 65 years ago, Watson and Crick discovered the structure of DNA. And I think you look at many subsequent inventions around that whole primary understanding. Antibodies were first discovered in Cambridge, in the labs at the Medical Research Council. And I think those are sorts of milestones in time, that they've been great discoveries. Have they been significant commercial discoveries? Well, at the time, they were great scientific discoveries. What it's enabled, and that's where One Nucleus plays its role, is how do you help people translate great science into great products?
Does the UK have a comparative advantage in biosciences?
I think it's an advantage it's in the Premier League, and I think it's an advantage of now it has a really strong brand, and therefore whether you're in South Australia, whether you're in Japan, even with Europe, and we have all the Brexit issues going on, it's still an amazing brand to say, no, I want to be in that Premier League.
So there you have it, plenty of people doing business with success here in the UK. If you're inspired to join them, let's find out how to negotiate the British capital itself. The General Manager of the Andes London Liverpool Street should be able to help. Welcome to the show, Otto.
Thank you.
So what are the top areas to dine in London at the moment? Is anything hot at the moment?
Oh gosh, there's so much hot in London. Actually, there's nothing that is not hot actually. But the nice thing is about London is you find everything for any pocket as well. So if you want to have the fancy stuff, there's plenty to go to all over London. Me personally, I just love the area we're in. It's the east of London. It's authentic. It is where London comes together, so to speak. It's not the touristic side of London that everybody else knows. You know, like the West is very touristy. This is very authentic. This is very, very much London now, today.
So would you call East London the real London?
Absolutely. This is where everything happens. This is where people go out. This is where people go for drinking. This is where people, the Londoners, like to come. And the nice thing about the east of London is that it's not yet really discovered.
So as a business traveller, what's the best way to get around London? Is it black cabs, the tube?
To have a car and drive yourself here is crazy. You don't do it. It takes you way too long. And if you take, a taxi or an Uber, you don't really know what time you're going to arrive. So if you want to have a safe way of getting to your appointment, you take the tube, because that's still the most reliable form of transport if you want to get somewhere in time.
If I had a day off here in London, what would you recommend I do?
I start off here at the Andes, walk via Leadenhall Market, which is a market from the 12th century, to Borough Market, which is a very big food market. Go there, have a look, get on to the Tate Modern, yeah? Via the Tate Modern, get over the bridge, go and see St. Paul's Cathedral. You can all do it on foot, it's wonderful. So that's what I would do.
When you entertain business clients here in London, do you take them to the pub or a restaurant?
Yes, you actually tend to do that because the British are very social people. So the pub is like, a second living room, so to speak. And afterwards you like to take them for maybe a nice meal somewhere. Although the British tend to be very formal, yeah. Once you come to the pub, that formality is gone, and you really can become very good friends.
I hope you've seen from our trip that the UK is a significant economy despite the noise about Brexit. There are still many companies, both large and small, having continued success here in the old dark. So what do we learn? This is a significant economy, so get beyond the Brexit headlines and look at the opportunities by industry and region in detail. The UK is not just England, as we know from all the referendum. Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, even the north of England all have their own investment incentives. You may be a long way from home over here, but you're not alone. Get help at Australia House and advice from Invest UK and their Australian counterparts. Networking in the UK, especially London, can help you in business. So try attending social functions at Australia House or join organisations like the Australian British Chamber of Commerce. Well, that's it for this special UK edition of the Airport Economist. See you on our next business adventure together, somewhere around the big wide world. I'm Tim Harcourt, and I'm the Airport Economist. Welcome to Lima. Welcome to Santiago. Welcome to Buenos Aires. I'm Tim Harcourt, the Airport Economist, and I'm going to show you around this economic powerhouse of South America.
Argentina is open for business.
We must have exported to over 60 countries around the world now. You can't treat every country the same in Latin America.
So do you regard Chile as the gateway to Latin America?
It is a really good launching pad from which to land here and do business elsewhere.
We have learned that there is not a recipe to do business in different cultures.
What are the opportunities now in the Peruvian economy?
Peru has the best cuisine in Latin America, and it has driven a mini boom in tourism.
This is our campaign to promote the Peruvian superfoods around the world.
But don't forget, Chile really is a leader. It's one of the best performing economies in Latin America. So being an OECD member is an opportunity for them to pull along the rest of Latin America.
Normally, people do business after of the office, so we go out for dinner.
Pisco Sour is our flagship drink. So it's how we actually take pisco to the world.
So Buenos Aires is regarded as the Paris of the South. How did you get that reputation?
We have a feel of Paris, it's true, European feel. There's a lot of opportunities here in Argentina.
Why Brazil? Everybody wants to be in Brazil.
The outlook for the future looks quite bright.
The government badge takes you a long way in Latin America, and Mexico is no exception.
See you on our next business adventure together, somewhere around the great globe. I'm Tim Harcourt, and I'm the Airport Economist.